Tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to Coalesce. Thank you for choosing to spend your day with us. My name is Joel Labes, and I'm a Senior Developer Experience Advocate at DBT Labs, and I'll be hosting this session, Empathy Building in Data Work, which is going to be run by Lorena Vazquez. Lorena is the Associate Director of Business Analytics at Wonder and is joining us from New York today. She's been in data for over 15 years, and like so many of us, got into it by accident. There's so many great talks at Coalesce over the years that have taken a holistic view of data work, not just worrying about the tooling, but also looking at the wider context. And Lorena's talk is going to follow in that fantastic legacy. So let's get me out of the way. But before we dive in, I want to share a couple of recommendations on how to get the most out of this session. If you're not already in the Coalesce Empathy Building channel of the DBT Slack, then there's still time to join. That's where all of the chat Q&A is going to take place. If you need to join, you can go to getdbt.com/community. And then again, that channel is Coalesce Empathy Building when you enter that channel. In there, you can ask any other attendees questions. You can make comments, you can make jokes, you can have some fun with it. And at the end, Lorena's going to be available for 15 minutes or so to answer your questions. But you can ask your questions at any time and get feedback from other participants. Let's get started. Over to you, Lorena.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel. I'm excited to be here today and to really share something that's really very close to my heart. And I'm hoping that out of this session today, you will come out of it with a little bit more understanding of the people that you work with, the teams that you lead. And so today's title is Empathy Building in Data Work, How We Can Go Beyond the Work and Really Understand People. So before we get there, I think you should probably get to know me a little bit. My name is Lorena Vazquez. I'm a nerd at heart, recovering finance software engineer, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means. I really have a passion for data, for the people, the systems, and really just above all things, love my family, my dogs, and have a big passion for teaching. And so Joel mentioned a little bit, we've got all these topics and different talks here today, but why this topic? I mentioned that this is really close to my heart, and in reality, what I really felt like for a big chunk of my career was like this. I felt like I was a stormtrooper. I was literally just stuck. Here's my facade. Here's my armor. Here is who I was expected to be. Just here's the things that we needed to be. But in reality, even though we are sometimes told to come to work and kind of look like this, what we really look like and how we really show up is like this. And so hopefully you've seen this movie before. It's the Inside Out movie. Highly recommended. It's a great story about how we really have all these emotions that are playing in our minds all the time, and really being able to balance all of that and being able to understand it. And so sometimes we come to work, happy and like with joy. Sometimes we're sad because there's things that are happening, or things either around us from society, things that are happening within our homes, within our families, friends, or things that are happening at work. Or sometimes we're just like angry, and we're just upset about the situations that are there, may not know how to really express what's going on. And so I want to really talk about today is how do we really understand people? Not the systems, not the process, not the tools. It's really about understanding people, because at the heart of everything that we do, we're working with stakeholders. We're working with different folks every single day. And we really need to get to that level, because ultimately we are just humans, not robots, right? So let's get started. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and one of the things to kind of really talk a lot with her is definitions, because she's constantly going, Mommy, what does this mean? Mommy, what does that mean? And to try to explain really much more adult type of terms to her, I have to go back to the dictionary and go, hold on, let me give you an example. This is what this means. Try to break it down. And so I like to think that we have to think about anything that we talk through and understand, get to that common knowledge first. So what is empathy? Merriam-Webster Dictionary says it's the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another, of either the past or present, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objectively explicit manner. really, what does that mean for us? It's you really need to feel what that person is going through or what they're explaining to you as well, as if that is really happening to you. Not just, hey, I'm sorry, that sucks. Like, how would you feel if you were in that same situation? One of my favorite authors is Dr. Brene Brown. And if you haven't read any of her books, I would say start with Dare to Lead. It is, to me, was a very transformative book around leadership and understanding a little bit more about the people that we're in and also who we work with. And she mentions this, that empathy fuels connection, but sympathy drives disconnection. And I was really trying to find out, like, what is a meme? What is a thing that I can show that, hey, like, this is the real difference? And I saw this quote and I was like, that is 100% correct. Empathy fuels connection because it gets us closer to understanding each other and understanding what we're going through. And so, what I want to step into is how do we, now that we know what empathy is, what it is not, how can we actually use empathy and how can empathy help us to do better at work? So I want to share with all of you things that have helped me over my career, things that I've learned from great leaders that I've been around on how to think about empathy, especially in data work, right? There's a whole cycle around it. We talk about hiring, we talk about teamwork, we're working with stakeholders all the time. We have our own managers that we work through. So how do we think about applying things? How do we see empathy in the work that we do? And what are some things that you can be doing on your day-to-day basis to kind of get more of that, get better understanding, work better with the people that you work with? So we'll start with the numbers because, we're at a data conference. How are we not going to talk about numbers? So 1 out of 3 people say their manager has the greatest impact on building empathetic workplace. There's a company that does this like empathy summary every single year, and they've been kind of doing this work. And out of the data that they've kind of collected here, what I thought was pretty interesting was it's about the manager. It's not so much of, yes, there's the top leaders in the organization, but it's that person that's so close to you to help you that give you that impact. So the other pieces here is, 69% of employees say their organization is empathetic. And why is this stuff, why is this important for us? Because in reality, what we want to be able to do is we know that we can control certain things. We can't control everything that goes on, but us as managers, us as people who work in different teams, how can we contribute to the improvement of our teams, to the improvement of our work, to the improvement of our organization? And it really starts with us as individuals. So we're going to start off first with, how do we think about empathy in hiring? I'll give you my tips here. Listen. Sometimes it's hard because we just want to go through the list of things and make sure everybody checks the boxes. But take a step back and listen to the issues or concerns that a candidate may have, because maybe that's a reoccurring issue that's happening. Maybe that is a thing that you have to maybe refine, go back into the job description and refine to make sure you are selecting the right people, or that you are calling out that skill set, that specific thing that you've talked about that may not have been something that you expressed originally. Another thing here is really don't assume. Don't make assumptions around gaps in their employment. We know we've heard like the great resignation, we've heard of all these shifts in employment. And I think one of the, again, back to my slightly being, being scarred in the financial industry, is the assumptions that we say, okay, this person, trying to track down how many years they've worked, where they've worked, were there any gaps? And really, honestly, people have different experiences. They all go through different life cycles, different things in their life, that we should not make any assumptions around that to say, why is that the reason? What's going on? Or say, oh, does this person do X, Y, and Z? It doesn't matter. We want to be able to understand the individual and how they're going to be able to be effective in your workplace. And the last thing I want to talk about here in hiring is around team respect. And this piece to me is very interesting because we really want to know, how is the person that we're interviewing, how are they also working with the team that is, your existing team? Are they treating them fairly? Does it seem like, they were disrespectful or not? One thing I personally have is a zero tolerance list. here are certain things that it doesn't matter how great of a skill set that person may have, doesn't matter how many years of experience. If that person, and it's for me, it's a personal no jerk rule, which is this person must be able to treat the people that I have on the team with respect. And my example that I have is it's really a hard pass when someone makes someone in the team feel uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, it has to be that that person has to work within your team. It has to be, even in like hard times, even in good times, it's somewhat a relationship, right? And so all of that to tell you, really listen in when you're hiring, understand the dynamic between your team, making sure that you are hiring for the skill sets that are there and not to make any assumptions around employment. So now we talked about hiring. How does empathy, how does compassion, how does inclusivity kind of work within your team? And so you as a manager, what are some of the things that you can be doing? Having awareness. Are people having an off day? Are they that first, that second picture I showed from Inside Out? Are they in that, angry mode? Are they in a sad mode? Are they in a joyful mode? What is going on? Being able to understand if things have kind of changed, because they may not necessarily tell you what is going on. They may not tell you, be very forward about it, but be aware of what's going on within your team, what has changed in the dynamic itself, to be able to bring that up and say, hey, I'm going to take you apart, and we want to be able to have this conversation to see what's really going on. Because sometimes it's hard for people to be vulnerable. It's hard for people to kind of share that out and really be able to create that space, right? As managers, really, it's about being that example, being able to say, hey, I may say that I'm creating space, but I must be able to create that space. I have to be able to show you that I actually care. And so when you're asking me for certain things, I need to make that time. And maybe that time is really on the one-on-one meetings. Maybe it's creating that space there to say, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Everything all right? Sometimes people just want to hear that, right? We want to be able to feel like they're seen, and it's not the same every single day piece that we go through. My one thing that I do with my team, and if they're on high, is we talk about what's going on at work, our own lives. We talk about, so what are your plans for the weekend? What is going on? What are some moments, some wins that may be going on that are really outside of that? Because it feels so rigid if we're all in the same stormtrooper helmet every single day to say, okay, we show up, we do our daily stand up, this is what we do, but we don't get to know the people as people. So we talked about your team. How do we show empathy in that experience? But how do we show empathy with our stakeholders? Where sometimes I think everyone on the data side has felt this. We feel like the service desk, right? Oh, here's the request. Here's this next thing. Here's this. Here's the other part. But really having to take a step back here and say, let me get to know you. A lot of our stakeholders, right? They've gone through different experiences within data, with different tools, with different systems. And one of the things I end up saying is, if you have a data scar, and they may not tell you what scars they may have, but ask about their experience. What has that been? Because the decisions or things that they may be saying may be really as a result of something that went on in a previous role, in a different experience, or they heard through something else. And really trying to understand that piece. Oh, wait, you had that experience because X, Y, and Z. What else happened? How did that ever get resolved? Because trying to understand that piece gets into a bit more as to who the person is and how you can approach them a little bit better. Awareness, once again, and I think one of the big pieces through all this is really being a bit more tuned to what is actually going on. Is the stakeholder that you're working with going through a difficult time? Is there organizational changes that are happening within their teams that is maybe causing a problem? Maybe that's something you can step in and kind of help out a bit more. Hey, I know you don't have this person on your team anymore, but maybe we can leverage some of the stuff that we have to help you and ease a little bit of that anxiousness or fear or confusion that may be happening within that team. And really, this other piece here is really trying to understand, how do you go beyond just building the dashboards? So we talked a little bit on awareness. We talked about getting to know people and what's there. Really find out what keeps them up at night. Um, it sounds really silly to say it, but real, really a thing that gets tricky with especially senior leaders is they may not necessarily tell you what's going on, but you really have to, hey, what's going on? What's keeping you at night? Keeping you up at night. It may hopefully they're not telling you their horrible dreams, but trying to understand how can data solve some of these problems? How can we find solutions? Because in essence, when you're working with your stakeholders, it's not so much about can I do you this favor? Can I build this thing out? Is being able to understand their thought process, being able to understand how you can improve their work that they do. How can data then inform, make better decisions for what they're doing, and maybe make it in a faster way? So, how can we then build products? How can we build solutions to actually help them solve the real thing that keeps them up at night? And that sometimes gets a little bit tricky when all we're doing is here's a requirements document. This is the thing that we're trying to fill out. It gets a little bit tricky when we're doing that because really what ends up occurring for us is we start to lose sight of really what goes on if all we're doing is in that same mode. The one example I have here, and I thought, this is something that I've started to do actually in the last few years, is really I love coffee. So I can drink up to 4 cups. If I go beyond that, it's a little too much for me. But I say, hey, can we go out for coffee or tea if someone wants to have tea? But really part of doing this and getting to know your stakeholders, and this can be anything, right? This could be a product manager, an engineer. This can be a senior leader, someone much higher rank within your organization. Really what you're trying to get at is get people to feel safe, create that space for safety, and being able to have that honest conversation outside of the normal boundaries that you have at work. Maybe you're working remotely and you're at a company that's fully remote. Maybe it's just saying, hey, can we just take 15 minutes? I just want to catch up. I just want to be able to see how things are going. No strings attached. And I think that's a big piece there is when we start to think about everything that we do is transactional. COVID was something that I think peeled back a little bit of that layer of everything just being meeting after meeting, Zoom after Zoom or Teams after Teams. And what we really had to think about is we're now in people's homes, like you're currently in my home, and being able to understand people as people. And people were getting burnt out because they were just in meetings the entire time. But take that moment. If you're working remotely, if you're working in person, hey, no strings attached. I just want to have a chat. I just want to talk. I just want to see how you're doing. Nothing else, nothing for them to own, because it starts to lower a little bit of that guard and allows for you to also work with them and get to know them at a much more personal level. So we talked enough about stakeholders. I think it's a big part of our time that we end up working with every single time. But we talked about teams and we talked about, hiring, we talked about the stakeholders. And sometimes we forget that we also have to, one of, the people that we work with is also our managers. And so this is the reminder to everyone, our managers are people too. They also go through, their same set of emotions and everything else that may be going on. They're still going through all of that. And sometimes having that cue to say, hey, wait a minute, I may be dumping all of my emotions and everything else on this person, but they're also going through things. They're also having situations, things that you may not know about, but just a mental reminder here for everyone. Yes, our managers are people too. Understand boundaries. Now, this is something personally for me that I like to find out things and I like to always ask until I find an answer because I want to know. It's one of the pet peeves I have. It's just like, why? Why doesn't that work? And why doesn't this work? Really about understanding your boundaries too. And that's something that I've had to work through as well. Being able to understand that your manager can't tell you everything that's going on. In the same way that as a parent, I can't tell everything that goes on or reasons or decisions that go on with my daughter, because I want to make sure that, hey, only when it's needed that I need to have this conversation. Only when we need to actually talk about that you're ready for it, or it's not the time, or we don't need to create panic or any of things like that. We want to make sure that, hey, they actually can't tell you everything. And the last thing here, it's really about speaking up. So, us as people in teams that, have our managers really be able to speak up. I mentioned before, making sure that we are setting the example by creating the space as managers, but us as well as, people who report to others, being able to ask for that space. If that doesn't exist, speak up. Really to ask and say, hey, how can we have more of these open conversations? Also be that example. Maybe nobody else in your team is is vulnerable enough or wants to have that flexibility, but maybe they do. And all you have to do is be able to speak up and be able to say, hey, can we create this? Can we talk about this? Can we have a time in which we can have these tougher conversations? That's kind of the example that I have here, is really ask for specific time to discuss sensitive topics. Maybe it's a topic around change in your organization. Maybe you want to actually focus on that and be able to create that because there's uncertainty within your team of what's going on. And ask for that. Ask for that space, because your manager be like, all right, they don't have any questions. They don't know what's going on. Be able to do that. Be able to ask that. Raise your hand and ask for help if you need it. So I say all these things because in reality, we are all humans. And one of the things that in the past, 2 years or so, I've actually had to work through a bit more is being able to understand, how do we really reach people, and not just reach people. Oh, hey, how's it going? I have a quick question for you. I have a quick question for you on Slack. Quick question. Really, like, that's always passing, but how do we build relationships? How do we go ahead and understand people for who they are, understand how they're feeling, understanding what's going on? How do they see a particular project? How are they feeling around that particular project? Do they, they struggling a little bit? What's going on? Is something not making sense, or do they need help with something else? In reality, what we really need to do is take that step back and understand that in reality, we are all humans. And being able to really realize, and I'll leave this one slide here, is that even data wants it to have feelings. And so hopefully you get this joke as well. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm very much a nerd at heart. This is Data from Star Trek, if you don't get it. And he wants it to have an emotion chip. So hopefully this chat has been extremely helpful for all of you. It has been something that I really wanted to share with the DBT community. The minute that speaker submissions came on, I was like, what do I want to talk about? What is the thing that's really, really close to my heart? And being able to share something that's a little bit different, something that really helps us to grow and helps us to be better humans and also better people at work. So I want to thank everyone for there. We're going to continue the conversation on Slack, on the Coalesce Empathy Building in Slack channel. So hopefully you all enjoyed today's session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lorena. That was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it, and the chat on my other screen is popping off. You are indeed a big nerd. I can confirm that.
Yes.
I've never heard the term data scars, but as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Yeah, and everyone's really resonating with what you were saying about stakeholders. There's a lot of really good chat happening in the Slack chat. So it'll be interesting to get your feedback on what's going on there. That's us for the morning, the afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. We've got an hour break now. So I will see you all back here in an hour for Know Your Worth, Unpacking Business Value delivered by data teams. But again, Lorena, thank you so much. That was a great chat.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you so much. See everyone.
Bye.